I just got really fed up with this because it was always we're not a huge company, but it was going through 2 or 3 layers of people to get to the truth. And it was ridiculous. And so what I did was on a plane and I exported our opportunities from Salesforce as a CSV. And then I opened up Cursor and I said, hey, Cursor, I've got this CSV of my pipeline. I've got the DuckDB command line tool, which lets you run SQL queries on a CSV file. I was, can you forecast my next quarter for me? And it did a way better job than any other tool that we had. I was able to ask follow-up questions too, like, oh, why is this opportunity low likelihood? And it would go, oh, well, it didn't have any activity, or opportunities that have activity over this period of time tend to be zeros, and this thing is sat in eval for too long, so it's probably actually make it to negotiation or whatever. It was really incredible. The models, this was like Sonnet 3.5 at this point, and so the models had gotten really good, and I was like, man, this is incredible. I want this now to run my business. Hey, I'm Pete. I'm the CEO here at Dagster Labs. I come from an engineering background originally, but now I've just been doing the startup thing for a while.
Yeah. So in preparation for this interview, I was doing what people typically do, stalking on LinkedIn, look at any communications sent over, and the concept of RevOps came up as what your contribution is to the industry. And I think really quick, I want to give my background on RevOps, which I didn't know was a thing until my last job. Most jobs, I'm a formally trained product designer. I'm a product designer right now, been in the product department. Ironically, not knowing about such a valuable lever of how you could go to market bothered me when I found out about it. I'm like, there's this whole function that captures pipeline and stuff that, and could even give us an understanding of if we're qualifying the right leads and if there's a product market fit. But the main challenge was the typical tech stack of RevOps is a Salesforce, which is a very big, I'm just going to say it on the record, a very big overpromise, underdeliver software stack. I've never seen a good implementation of Salesforce at any job I've worked at. The fact that you need
at 5 to 6 digits of implementation spend. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's all, that it's not a useful software if there's a multi-billion dollar cottage industry. Let's not call it cottage industry, multi-billion dollar, the oxymoron, multi-billion dollar consulting industry around just this implementing this software. And then the type of talent that industry usually attracts to people that aren't really good solution architects in the first place. They just don't have the right skill set. And so it's always, I've always felt it's been a very tense, combative relationship with RevOps in my experience because of how hard Salesforce is. And also Salesforce offers everything. It's not just a CRM anymore. So then there's these conversations of, why don't we just use MuleSoft and stuff? And then you're like, are you getting paid by Salesforce? We don't need that. We have an in-house engineering team. This is a core business process for fulfillment. That's my background. And that might give you, I share that because that might give you some context on what my assumptions are about RevOps. I know I like the idea of it. I love the concept of it. I want it to work, but I don't know how to move forward.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It's one of these things that I feel is an underrated function. It's very important for the business to really nail their RevOps function. There's actually a couple of functions within go-to-market that I think that especially startups undervalue. I think ops is one of them. And I think that pre-sales is another. If you go online and go look at startup, how to start a startup content, not a lot of people talk about pre-sales engineering or RevOps. Talk about hiring a great head of sales, hiring sales reps at the right velocity. But all that stuff sits on a foundation of data and being able to actually implement the product. And so pre-sale, I think our topic is not about pre-sales, but I do put pre-sales in that same bucket as RevOps, whereas these are very important foundational pieces of infrastructure in order to sell an enterprise product. And a lot of companies put them in too late. I also think that you really hit the nail on the head on the way that RevOps has been framed in the past. It's very Salesforce CRM oriented. And I think that one of my observations has been over the last year or two, RevOps function has changed a lot. And I think some people are starting to call it GTM engineering now. And I kind of think that's a rebranding in many ways of some of the stuff that has traditionally been in the RevOps function, maybe with a couple of tweaks to it. So it's just a very exciting time, I think, to be looking at this category.
Yeah, especially with, I mean, the reliability of AI agents. I've implemented an agent stack into my post-production workflow, and it's allowed me to really ramp up like my productivity while
Mhm.
maintaining costs. And before we recorded, you're like, hang on, let me spin down these agents I have going on so I don't mess
Yeah.
up with the recording quality. What would walk me through the insight that you had? Because I think as of this recording, 2026, March, and it's one's been doing this for more than 18 months, I think. So what was that? Can you walk me through that moment where you're, oh, this changes everything, and you started adopting in your workflow?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think I have a pretty good story on this one too. We had gone on paternity leave at the end of 2024 for a couple of weeks. And I was using Cursor for the first time serious. I mean, I think I played around with it for before that, but this was really the first time that I tried to do a lot with it. And I found that it was this magical experience up to about 2,000 lines of code. And then it started basically writing gibberish after that because it lost the context, right? It blew out its context window. So, it's like, okay, this technology is cool. I could see it being helpful in some limited way, but not super transformative yet. Um, and then fast forward a couple of months, and we're having some problems on go to market at our company. We are in this situation where the forecasts were always wrong and the opportunities were moving through the pipeline in ways that we couldn't predict. It just became very hard to run the business. And we did have some a sales ops person at the time. We had some pretty dashboards that I could look at in Salesforce. And what I would always get back was, this is what it's going to be because Salesforce says so. And then it would always be wrong. And then you go to the actual go to market people that are on the ground, and the conversation is, number one, it's every deal is a snowflake and very nuanced, and it's impossible to get any sort of aggregate view of what's going on. And then the second thing is that there's this, you tell your sales team to create pipeline, they will put pipeline into the CRM. Does that make sense? No, if you start to
Yeah,
kind of
they
challenge,
they anchor on the object. They get too literal rather than leading indicators that generate pipeline.
yeah, and then you tell the team to create pipeline, they get happy ears and they put stuff in the pipeline and they defend it, even when maybe it shouldn't be defended. And so anyway, this is all a data problem and maybe a management problem too, but there's a big data problem here. And so I just got really fed up with this because it was always going, we're not a huge company, but it was going through 2 or 3 layers of people to get to the truth. And it was ridiculous. And so what I did was I was on a plane and I was actually going to Snowflake Summit, and I exported our opportunities from Salesforce as a CSV. And then I opened up Cursor and I said, hey, Cursor, I've got this CSV of my pipeline. I've got the DuckDB command line tool, which lets you run SQL queries on a CSV file. I was, can you forecast my next quarter for me? And it did a way better job than any other tool that we had. I was able to ask follow-up questions too. Oh, why is this opportunity low likelihood? And it would be, oh, well, it didn't have any activity, or opportunities that have activity over this period of time tend to be zeros. And this thing is sat in eval for too long. So it's probably actually make it to negotiation or whatever. It was really incredible. The models, this was like Sonnet 3.5 at this point. And so the models had gotten really good. And I was, man, this is incredible. I want this now to run my business. And I actually did one other thing, which was I made like a little command line tool with the help of Cursor at the time. That was like, you would give it some data points and it would give you a bar chart and write it out as a file on disk. And so I said, visualize my pipeline, in these different segments, and it would like spit out these files, and like they were like pretty good data visualizations, right? And we ended up running our business off of that crappy system for a while. And then I was talking to we had hired a data analyst to help us out with RevOps. And he was like, hey, this is really cool. You should make this a Slack bot. And so we made it a Slack bot. We, for better or worse, gave it to everybody at the company. That caught fire like crazy. Everybody started using it like every week or every day. And then we started giving it to our investors, started giving it to some customers, and eventually it became like a product that we offered. So it's to me, it was like the moment where AI really transformed my work life and our business. And I think the big realization that I had was like, number one, it became like accurate enough to be useful. And number two, like I began to be trained to expect some level of inaccuracy. And that was actually fine. And so I think that's when I realized that AI was going to transform a lot, was like, it was getting close enough to like what humans expect. And humans were starting to adapt to like what to expect from AI. And like, I was like, oh, these are going to meet in the middle eventually. And this is going to be really cool.
Yep. So yeah, like if you listen to that, I don't recommend it to like look for this specific like story I tell, but like whenever I tell a story of like why I left product management. So I was in design, did a little bit hybrid PM design, and then I was asked to go into full-time product management. And I was a reluctant product manager but I knew it was the right thing because I was a more strategic designer, and I was getting a pretty good track record of, being right and having, the soft skills to, um, drive results across through teams. And so I was asked to do it, and I'm like, okay, I guess like this is just the natural progression of my career. Usually like, the more strategic designers go into product management, and like, this will be kind of like it's kind of like melodramatic, but like my sacrifice so that like designers could do better work that work with me.
Right.
Like, and engineers could do better work. I mean that like the melodrama is more of an indication of like, why would I be melodramatic? That's a better reflection of the product management job family as a whole. Like, hey, maybe any PMs listening to this should reflect. But it was around when Claude Sonnet 3.5 came out where I'm like, I'm like, I have like the unmetered Figma make and, trying out all the tools. And I'm like, I'm going back to design. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
Because it's like, there's never been a better time to be a maker, because now you could do all the admin mundane stuff. Like Claude's pretty good at like being your chief of staff to keep people updated, like all the stuff that you needed like a project manager for. That's over. Like I don't need a babysitter anymore. I'm able to stay on top of it, even get into market analysis while staying on top of my responsibilities, and actually follow through, like not just be the idea strategy person, but actually follow through and execute at the same time. Right. And there's no like continuity. I don't have to convince anyone. Like I've already convinced myself. And like that has led to like a pretty awesome like step function. But I'm going to just say like a statement out loud to like kind of prompt your next question is, I was reading this article about how like AI isn't taking jobs away, it's taking away excuses. And I feel like that's what happened here, is like, there's no excuse. Like, this is pretty good. Right. So like, how did the org navigate like this demo? Right. Because I'm sure if you're a Salesforce admin and like you're like someone comes to you and is like, hey, actually, this is better than your dashboards. How did you walk me through like that, like change management process of like how you implemented that? And
I think that comment that you made is really funny, by the way, that it takes away excuses. It is very true. I think a lot of, if somebody is in a meeting and they ask a question and they want oftentimes in a group meeting and someone's got a question and they want a side channel with somebody about it. And my first question is, did you ask AI about that? Like, how does X work in the code base or in the product? So if you ask Cloud Code, it'll probably tell you. But so the change management, I think, is an important thing to dig in on here. And I think this very quickly gets into like very big and heady existential questions. But like where I can tell you the story of how it unfolded in our organization, which is
Mm.
basically like we're a venture-backed startup. We want to tackle a really big market. We are like always, because of that, we're always bottlenecked on hiring in that we will never have enough people to tackle the market as quickly as we want. And so the way that manifested in the organization was like there were always these like RevOps projects that were happening and like kind of strategic data analysis and understanding of the funnel performance and stuff like that was like always competing with getting better quoting stood up, getting better like telemetry on our website stood up, like all this stuff, right? And I think initially the reaction from the team was something, I'm glad Pete's not bothering me with these questions. I'm a little worried that he's doing AI model and drawing conclusions without me, but at least, but it's not people were looking at this and were worried about labor substitution or anything like that. I do think trust them is important, but we basically started running the business off of it. And I think there were definitely some last year, I think, was a transition period for a lot of people that there were a lot of people that were very resistant to like the changes coming from AI. And I think that they were like not thrilled about us like taking this on as like a real product. And I think that in 2026, everybody understands why we made the decisions that we made. I think it's pretty obvious in hindsight. But middle of the year last year, I think a lot of people were still in there's a stochastic parrot mindset. The code is never going to be good. The data analysis will never be accurate. You have to be able to trust your numbers, etc. And I do think that like we tried to manage a change internally as best as we could. But it just took a lot of, I think the macro had to adjust as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you had to be like misunderstood long enough for the technology to catch up. And luckily it's moving so fast that you don't have to wait too long. You don't have to be like James Cameron waiting 10 years to make Avatar, right? Like
Right,
it's
right.
yeah. Um what have been so David Ogilvy is well known for having like these like one-liners, like
Mhm.
maxims that he uses to just like quickly like end a debate. So if someone like wanted to like make a, a working group or a committee, he's like, okay, go to like Central Park. Do you see any statues of committees? Like it's like it was a big like DRI, directly responsible individual
Uh-huh.
culture at Ogilvy and Mather. And like what like as you handled the change management and the technology got better, so like you didn't have to like sell it as much. What were you think like some like overarching like principles that like you would coach, like your team members, employees on like how to like reframe how they work so that they could start to reinvent themselves?
Yeah, I think it was a tough year last year in terms of like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people started to absorb the change like last year. And then I think Opus 4.5 hit in December. And now like a lot more people are going through their existential crisis now, but we started to see it last year. And it was more, I think, resistance to it than anything else. And I think that it's the best way to. So there was a certain amount of communication that and like education that had to happen, which is, hey, we're not like mandating the use of AI tools here, but we are strongly encouraging you to give them a second look and you can expense them. And I think even that message was like tough for people to hear, I think, because they thought the implication was they thought it was a thinly veiled AI mandate or whatever. We don't have an AI mandate. I don't think you should tell people like how to do their job, really. Certainly not the
Mhm.
senior people. But I do think that sometimes people need to be like alerted to changes that are happening in other organizations and be able to adapt to those and develop those skills on the job. I think that was some people got on board, some people like got on board, some people pushed back, and some people just tried it and weren't enthused and then left it alone. I think that the folks that were really against some of the AI strategy we just sat them down and said, listen, this is an agree to disagree situation at this point. I respect you as a professional and you're like good at your job. You got to do your job. I got to do my job. And at the end of the day, this is a place where we disagree. And some of those people ended up like becoming very enthusiastic developers on our AI products and leveraging the hell out of all these AI tools. And others ended up going somewhere else that was working on stuff that was a little less AI oriented. And that's fine.
Yeah, what I've like noticed is like going back to the excuses comment is like here's like my maxim for like how you like lead change management. Like totally agree with you. Like solving problems with policy, like an AI mandate,
Mm.
it might be like the semi like libertarian, radicalization I've gotten in my life as a burned out millennial. But I've never seen like, oh, like let's just make a policy that doesn't acknowledge the complexities of a system and like
Right.
the human elements of a problem, and oh, it'll fix everything. We made a policy, and then they pat themselves on the back. But then you dig deep and like on the ground troops, and they're like, no, we're not doing that. It's not
Mhm.
That's not the reason, right? And like my thing is like, okay, the the Chicago Bulls, the dream team, Chicago Bulls in the 90s, like you couldn't not say you could not say that it was like it was like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and like all the other guys, Dennis Rodman, like they're all great players. But it was Michael's team. He was the linchpin organization. And I don't think I ever saw, I'll try to channel my inner David Ogilvy here. I don't think Michael raised the performance of the team by doing enablement seminars on
Right.
how to play better basketball. No, it was more of like him being like really good and then challenging them implicitly and explicitly, like through his leadership example. And like he antagonized them, just get on my level. And like, I don't, yeah, he's enablement seminars aren't the way to do it. And so I tried doing that when I was like in my last job with AI. I'm like, oh, like, like I'll do like a little like lunch and learn, it's always a lunch and learn. And it just doesn't work because people feel like they're being talked at. And so like at this new gig, I was just like, all right, like my desired outcome is two things from my peers. I'm going to not say anything and I'm just going to perform with these tools.
Mm-hmm.
And I either want two reactions. One, holy shit, I can't keep up with this guy. And like it pressures them to like start trying to figure out for like edges in their performance. Or two, how do you do that? They like come to me and ask like, how do I like produce this level of work at like this rate consistently? And then that's where I bring up like, oh, I use this Gemini gem to just like quickly think out and frame a problem. Cause most like decision documents are just templates and heuristics, and you just need to give it
Right.
context. And it does a pretty good first draft. And I use like this tool for quickly concepting designs, and then they start adopting it and stuff. And it just gets to the point where people like the water line starts going up naturally, where they start exploring. Okay, I'm going to take this idea from Caden, make it my own, and then it's their own, and then their performance goes up. It was a joke. Like I got like a comment where people were like, hey, I radicalized a staff engineer. No, I didn't. It was like, thanks for weaponizing this guy, because this guy just took like the ideas, made them his own, and started pushing like unblocking really big initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
like really fast, because he was able to quickly like get the context, get it into a readable format, socialize it. People read the doc and they're like, yeah, this is good. Let's do it. Which would have, as a staff, as an engineer, you don't have time to write architecture docs. No,
Right.
and frankly, no one has time to write PRDs, but like we have to, like if it's needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like I've just noticed, oh, nothing's really changed in my job. Like I still have this responsibility. I'm still held accountable for this experience. It's like I could just do more to simulate and de-risk my space. It's not like I'm still doing like the same amount of like structural bets. We're not like just shipping more features, but I can now like quickly think through and simulate and de-risk those bets. And so when I think about the example of like you're coming to your RevOps team and being like, hey, like I got this forecast from them. What should have happened was they should have already been like learning how to do this. And then when you ask for a forecast, they go to AI, they orchestrate like that workflow. You shouldn't have been spending time on that. And then they give you the numbers. And
Yeah. I think there's a certain magic to that, like kind of the going founder mode or whatever, where you just go really hands on. And there used to be this saying of code winning arguments. And now I think it's just like deliverables or prototypes or whatever win arguments.
mhm,
I think there's like a ton of truth to what you're saying on that. I've also found that you can only do so much as a kind of CEO, and there's a real waterfall, or sorry, domino effect starts to happen when, like you said, that very opinionated staff engineer that everybody looks up to uh, gets religion on it, and
mhm.
then they start to like really drive the kind of authentic bottoms up change throughout the organization,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
almost
cool.
like, yeah, it's like, as a CEO, it's, as always, it's a hiring problem, like getting the right people in to be a catalyst to the culture. I'm going to shift gears really quick because anyone listening for the first time, this is a Thinking Out Loud podcast. I've been giving comments. I've been professorial and esoteric. Well, it's my podcast, so I'm not going to apologize. But I do want to like talk a little bit about your expertise, like Pete. Like even with like all of this, the Slack bot, implementing all these workflows, change management, even with like easy access to this data, like you have an agent that like it gets you pretty reliable insights. Why do like teams that have access to this data still go off intuition?
I do think that I am not like a pure data driven guy. I think that it's been said a million times, but I'll say it again. It's if you're like only data driven, you'll optimize your way into a local maxima. And then if everybody does that, like what's your differentiation, right? So there's definitely a certain amount of human intuition and entropy that you inject into business strategy that I think is important. If what I like to do is I just like to do a synthesis where you get the vibe check from the vibe people. And I think the vibe people are sales reps, pre-sales engineers, support people, like the people that talk to customers and deal with the day-to-day realities on the ground. And they've got a very high resolution view of a very small part of the map. And what we're trying to do is create a high resolution view of the whole map. And so in order to do that, we need to get these like kind of high resolution little squares on the map. And then we have to interpolate between all of them and try to build a map of the world that like makes sense and is useful, right? And so data helps. Vibe checks at a very broad level helps, and like core samples going all the way down to like the kind of like data interaction with the customer is very important. What I found in our organization and our customers is that when you make data fast and easy and fun to use, and like our product is like, it's like it's like you hired like a sassy Gen Z data scientist or data analyst and locked them in a basement and made them analyze data all day. And they got a little bit like sarcastic about the whole thing. That's the like vibe of our product.
That's
And
the
it's like,
system prompt. That was the role, like in the markdown file.
there is some
Yeah.
stuff in the system prompt like that. Like we have a serious mode where you can turn off a lot of this stuff, but like by default, if there's something screwed up in your pipeline, it'll drop a pretty not mean, but it'll drop a meme into the chat that's related to let's making fun of the org. Anyway, it's supposed to be fun. And when it's fun and when it's easy to use, the data's like right there. Like way more people use it and way more people ask questions of it every day. So like our sales reps are pulling their own data before every call, basically. And they're like,
Mm.
what have we talked about in our sales calls? What support tickets have they opened? What features do they care about? What's their consumption look like? What are the priorities in their 10K public filing? Like all this data gets like they can just pull whatever they want. And increasingly we're starting to proactively push it to them. So that's been a big change, but that's still combined with like their intuition. And then from a leadership perspective, you know, what we often do is we go to the sales managers and we go to the sellers and we say, what's working, what's not working? They tell us. And then we basically just pressure test that a little bit with data. And we say, listen, like You just want to make sure that they're not over indexing on some sort of edge case for that's just affecting the last person they talk to. Let's just use data to make sure that we're like to try to disprove that. And if we can't disprove it, let's like trust the intuition and go with the intuition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, I think I've mentioned it in like job interviews where like I'm on an interview panel, and we're evaluating a candidate, and like one of the critiques is, well, they don't seem very data driven. I'm like, well, one, this is a design role. Two, I don't like data driven people,
Right.
like because it's like they're I used to be able to say this word, but they're like basically giving up responsibility.
Mhm.
Um, they're giving up. They're like abandoning like accountability and hiding behind the data. Like data driven just means like data shield to me. And it's like you're letting the data do the thinking for you. And that's always been a problem before AI was doing the thinking for you.
Yeah,
But yeah.
it's definitely I've observed this failure mode too. I don't know if this is exactly the best way to frame it, but I call them like pure play facilitators
Pure
where
play.
like people like everybody's seen this, right? There's like a manager or product person or come in and they run the brainstorm or they like look at the dashboard and then they like write it up and then say it.
Mhm.
Right, and it's yeah, you're aggregating like, there's some value in, like, aggregating information and then, like, doing a rote synthesis of it, but there's not really that much value in that, and, like, you have to do more than that, and especially these days, like, it's not gonna fly. So, I have found that is across many jobs, like, a really pre-AI and post-AI, it's, like, a really big problem, actually. Like, you get people that can pass interviews, but then when they come in, they have no opinions about the product or strategy of what they're doing. It's just running the playbook and doing the rote. Yeah. What do you think we should do? Okay.
Yeah. Like they're making it seem like they're being collaborative, but they're building up their list of scapegoats, right? It's the typical like product manager being like, well, the stakeholders didn't give us the requirements. And it's like, that's your job.
And yeah,
Go ahead. Go
no,
ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna violently agree with you. And it's like I think that like people are like sometimes it's a self confidence issue, right? And so I think the first
Yeah.
step is you like try to build up that person's like confidence as opposed to like aggressively manage them or whatever. You gotta be like, listen, like, hired you because we thought you're smart. Go be smart and have opinions and go break some stuff in the organization. Like, we didn't hire you to just keep doing what we're doing. And so sometimes people get that, or I think there's kind of three paths that happen then. Some people like just can't do it. And
Mhm.
that is, I think, they're not, you probably shouldn't be on a small team if you're that type of person. Some people take that advice and break stuff the wrong way. And it's great. Like you're actually like doing the motions now. Let's have the conversations and dial in and make sure that we're like building a shared set of principles and understanding and like direction where we want to go. So like I love people like going and break stuff and get it wrong. Like that's fine. And as long as they're like open and collaborative at that point, like great. And then the people that eventually like nail it and they start breaking stuff and like when it gets rebuilt, it's like way better than it was before. And that I think is like the ideal and where we want to get to. And it's just you're not going to get that if you just regurgitating what the data says or regurgitating what other stakeholders say.
Yeah. And, or like what the framework outcome told you, right? Like you need to have the taste to be able to edit out I like what you said, like basically the general synthesis, which AI is really good at, by
Yeah,
the
right.
way. And you could have AI do a Hamilton Helmer 7 powers analysis. You could running like a framework with available data. AI is pretty good at, and I'm a big frameworks guy. I still am, but now I'm more of like an editor, like because now
Mhm.
I don't have to like do this like grunt work of like plugging things into like a template anymore. And like I really like that. Like I'm gonna just like your comment. I don't know if you ever watched like Night of the Seven Kingdoms or like on
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, okay. Then I won't spoil it, but I'm gonna give like a scene that like really impacted me in that show. But like the protagonist is like this super big and tall a guy named Duncan, and like he's just a really big guy, but like he was always he just had a rough childhood, so he's always like hunching forward, trying not to be noticed and stuff, even though it's really hard to miss in like a
Mhm.
crowd. And he meets this like really charismatic character where the character is just like, why are you not like why are you like hunching and stuff? Like I'm asking you a question, like he's trying to get his opinion on something, and the guy he's Duncan's like, I don't know, like, and he's like, hey, the gods made you tall, so be tall. Like
Right.
it's like, hey, you're smart. Like we saw potential in you, so be smart. Like I like that like kind of empowerment of like, hey, we go be smart. Tell me what no, what do you think? That's your job. That's why we hired you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's what the employee deserves, and that's what the company deserves. And I think you want to give people the opportunity to like do the best work of their career in your company. And if they're not, start with the stuff like just take a sober look at the whole setup and just make sure that everybody is set up for success there. And sometimes they're hiring mistakes or there are fits that aren't there, but that should be a last resort.
So my last question to you before we start wrapping up is what we actually didn't really define like what pre-selling is in a very concise way or like rev ops. I'll do the rev ops one. It's revenue operations.
Mhm.
So it's basically just saying like I think the end goal of revenue operations is to be able to forecast revenue, like the output of all that at work. You should be able to see like how much money you're going to be bringing in or however long the sales cycle is so that you could plan investments, etc. Oracle's doing this with like data center contracts. Hey, this is projected revenue because we signed these contracts. So like we're going to try to borrow money from the banks to build these data centers. Can you walk me through maybe just quickly define like pre-selling ops and then how does your product help with those aspects of operations and rev ops?
Yeah, yeah. Just we talked a little bit about pre-sales. I think some people call it sales engine. We call it sales engineering. Others call it forward deployed engineers. Very hot topic in Silicon Valley right now. I don't know why, because everybody's been doing it forever. Really, I think. But actually, I think even the way that the people are talking about forward deployed engineers is like wrong in that it's very much described as like a people talk about it in the sense of we are a large company now. We are scaling into the enterprise. We need a forward deployed engineering function now that we're big and selling the complex accounts. And I actually think in my old age, I got some grays going on here. I'm not sure if you can see. Your first sales hire might be like a pre-sales and like a sales engineer or FDE. And or at the very least, like you should hire a pod of 1 to 2 sales reps and a pre-sales person as like your initial sales team. And I think that the startup advice that most people get is hire 1 or 2 sales reps and have them sell it. And they like leave out the pre-sales person as like that's like a luxury the startup shouldn't pay for. But I think the reality is like products are getting more, it's more difficult. It's getting more difficult for buyers to know what to buy because the products are like simultaneously getting more complicated and like harder to tell apart. And so you really need, and especially for technical products, you really need like a technical person on the other end of the phone to like, be consultative and be a little less directly tied to the success of the deal so they can be a little more objective. I just think it's an important thing that's like a little bit overlooked in especially like early stage companies. But in terms of like how our product Compass helps here. We Are you familiar with the OODA loop? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, he's the famous
Y-
fighter pilot.
Yeah, it's some Air Force guy named John something. I forget his name, but it's a
Yeah.
observe, orient, decide, and act. And like a lot of people think that like if you simplify it, it's observe the world, act on what and observe it again, and then act. And the faster you get that loop and the higher quality you get the observations, like the better fighter pilot you'll be. And business is the same way, right? It's like the higher quality observations, the faster you can get them, faster you can act, and like the more basically if you do more of those loops than your competitors over a given time frame, you're going to win, they're going to lose. All other things held equal. And in modern business, that observation step is data. It's entirely data analysis and to a lesser extent like conversations with people, but a lot of those conversations are now reflected and stored in data warehouses through tools like Gong and stuff like that can be analyzed as data. And we think that it's very important for companies to be able to get that OODA loop as fast as possible to put data in the hands of every customer. And historically, or every stakeholder. And historically, that's been a data team or it's been a RevOps team empowering the RevOps stakeholders or the broader company. And we think that just agents provide, like Compass, provide an opportunity to do that in a very cost-effective way. And our focus as a product, again, is not building the fanciest technology or the fanciest query engine or anything like that. It's more like, how do we make this thing habit forming? Like I've got this like mental model of organizations in my head. Have you ever read like a book on OKRs, for example?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
Google's a very successful company. I'm not going to claim to be a better entrepreneur than Larry and Sergey, but I think that like the mental model of that book and of like high output management and all these other management books that are, in my opinion, stuck in the 80s is that like organizations are factories and there's like inputs and outputs and you're trying to maximize the amount of output for the given input that you can get. And I think that organizations are filled with a bunch of flawed people that have the same problem, and that the model is way less about a factory and way more like somebody trying to lose weight. If you put the fucking, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to swear. If you put the,
I swear to.
oh, okay. If you
Yeah.
put the M&Ms on the kitchen counter, like you're going to eat the M&Ms, right? And if you make it really hard to access data, you're never going to look at the data, right? It doesn't matter if your boss says, oh, you should be data driven. You're just not going to do it if it's hard to do. And so you got to set up like systems and processes and set up your life, your work life, to make it easy for people to make the right decisions, to choose the healthy snacks, not the junk food. I think that's what a lot of people miss with BI and a lot of people are still missing with AI tools, right? Like opening up ChatGPT, you get a blank canvas and a text box that can do anything. But what should I tell it to do? I don't even know as a person. I need help. I need to like make it, I need to know that the healthy snacks are right there in reach for them. Anyway, that's like a long-winded way of saying that we're focused on usability and habit formation.
Yeah. And it's the removing any blockers, right? And so like the biggest challenge I've seen, and this is my whole thesis of like what should be AI, what should be traditional like machine learning, like when we're trying to design products is um you have to decide if the problem is like a could be solved by an algorithm or a heuristic. And traditionally, if it couldn't be solved by an algorithm, you the heuristic solution was like form design and like field validations and like helping them like do data entry into a conceptual framework like a opportunity record in Salesforce. And then AI, AI can give you algorithmic level reliability for heuristic level problems. You don't have to like be a trained data person to be able to ask good questions to a well-trained agent to like get the right answer. And so it's like like the what I've noticed is like I mean like everyone I got a free year of Perplexity, I got a free year of Warp Terminal, and my thought was like, oh, when this runs out, I'll just go directly back to Claude and Claude Code. What I've realized is like they're not like people. The mistake people make about Perplexity and Warp is that is like, oh, they're AI wrappers, like they're model wrappers. There's like a
Mhm.
direct line between them, like they're just another UI. No, like it's an orchestration layer. Like Warp automatically gets creates reinforcing context, and that's what I'm paying for. And like even if it's a little more expensive on the token usage, I'm getting like it's handling all of the context and becoming more reliable by itself without me having to do that in like Cloud Code. And then the Perplexity is like orchestrating between like different models and giving me the best model and give me the best answer that way. Whereas I'd have to jump between all the different like foundation models to, get the best answer and like orchestrate it myself. So when you're buying like an agent that's not like, the big three, right?
Mhm.
Like model providers, like what you're looking for is like, how are they helping you orchestrate so that you don't have to orchestrate? Because like really you think people that like didn't people could have downloaded an open source version competitor to Salesforce before AI. Why didn't they do that? It's because they didn't have that tight OODA loop. And
Yep.
I just feel like how you described OODA loop, that's basically taste. It's like someone with like a
Mm.
tight loop is like good taste, right? So I think that I'm actually more bullish on like like cloud companies now, because I'm like, oh, they're focusing on like orchestrating that user experience, making sure that's reliable for that use case.
Yeah, I tried out Claude Cowork the other day, and I was like way underwhelmed, especially as compared to tools like Perplexity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Perplexity is great. Pete, do you feel like there's anything that hasn't been said that should be said before we sign off?
Probably tons of stuff, but I'll spare you all that stuff. But I just want to say it's been great chatting. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, I did too, and gives me a lot of hope that like next time around with like RevOps, it's going to be a more like productive conversation for me, because it's the technologies that like there's no excuses. It's like, hey, if it's hallucinating, then your data's bad. Like what could we do to fix the data? I really am excited to see like what Compass does, and how could people like find your work?
Yeah, our company website is dagster.io, and Compass is linked from the homepage. It's part of our data platform offering. And I'm just Pete Hunt on LinkedIn. I usually come up near the top, and so that's mostly where I post these days is LinkedIn.
Oh, well, Pete, thank you so much for coming on the show. You have a good one.
Cool. You too.
Hey, listener, thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.